Hey guys, tonight we drift down the Euphrates River, a journey through mud brick cities, whispering reeds, and temples where gods once sipped beer from golden goblets. You lie flat on a woven reed mat, your fingers sticky with date syrup, listening to frogs croak like off-key singers in the dark. Just beyond your toes, the river glimmers under a low-hanging moon, like melted silver drifting past fields of barley and forgotten gods. Somewhere nearby, a water wheel creaks and sloshes, lifting river water to thirsty crops. A dog barks at nothing in particular. You hear the distant chant of temple priests murmuring to the moon goddess while rubbing fragrant oil into their shaved heads. All around you is Mesopotamia, ancient, restless, and just a little weird. Oh, and small warning, if you're thinking this is just a peaceful float down the river, think again. Floods happen. So do crocodiles. Also, that old woman by the temple once banished a demon using nothing but a fishbone and a very aggressive chant. You probably won't survive this. But hey, it's bedtime. Let's pretend. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening in from somewhere cool or somewhere swampy, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always fun to see who else is floating along with us. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake to the smell of baking barley bread and the sharp sweetness of date wine. Morning sun pours through the flap of your reed hut, striping the walls in golden beams. Outside, the Euphrates murmurs its way through earth that's been tilled and tended since before the pyramids were even a sketch. You stretch, creaking like the roof beams above you, and slip outside into the awakening village. A farmer with skin like oiled leather shouts something about a broken dike. A boy scrambles past you holding a baby goat by the waist like a sack of grain. The goat does not approve. Down by the banks, fishermen tug in wide nets, and ducks scuttle across the mud like it owes them money. You wander toward the canal where the real action is. Mesopotamia isn't Mesopotamia without irrigation. The land between two rivers needs a little help being useful. Without ditches, channels, and those labor-intensive shade-offs, think wooden cranes operated by people with incredible patience. This place would just be very dusty real estate with trust issues. An old canal worker named Ishbi, who wears a crooked head wrap and grumbles like he was born annoyed, grabs your arm. "You've got hands. Use them," he says, thrusting a clay bucket at you. You follow him along a low embankment, stepping carefully so you don't end up face first in muck. The water smells green. Not bad, exactly, just like it's been places. Ishbi points to a cracked section of wall where water leaks like an embarrassed pipe. "We patch it, or we pray we float later," he says. "Guess which one the gods prefer?" You haul mud and straw and slap it into place. It's oddly satisfying, like primitive masonry therapy. But as you work, Ishbi tells you about the year the river flooded too early and swept away half the barley harvest. Priests blamed the sky god, he mutters, but everyone knows it was because Ur-Nammu's son peed in the canal. Historical fact break. Irrigation truly was the backbone of Mesopotamian society. Cities like Ur and Nippur existed only because of complex systems of dikes and canals, engineered without backhoes, spreadsheets, or chill. The Euphrates giveth, and the Euphrates absolutely taketh away if you don't respect her. You wipe sweat from your brow, smearing mud up to your eyebrows. A girl walks by, with a clay pot balanced on her head, judging your look with the full power of a teenage side-eye. Fair. A baby heron squawks somewhere behind a cluster of papyrus. Frogs splash. The wind rustles the tall grasses and makes the palm trees hiss softly like 1,000 whispering librarians. Oh, and by the way, historians still argue whether certain types of ancient canal locks were operated purely by hand or with animal help. Some claim oxen were involved. Others say that's just bull. Sorry, couldn't resist. You pause for water, lukewarm and carried in a leather flask that smells like an elderly sandal. A nearby priest in blue robes walks barefoot through the fields, sprinkling barley flour and humming a tune meant to keep the water spirits happy. He waves to you like he definitely knows something you don't. You wave back, suspiciously. At midday, a short break. You sit beneath a fig tree, whose branches droop like sleepy eyebrows. Ishbi unwraps a banana leaf and offers you something he calls sour lentil surprise. The surprise is that it's actually good. As you chew, you overhear gossip from nearby workers. Someone's daughter eloped with a stable boy. Someone else's uncle dreams in Sumerian. And apparently one of the temple goats is possessed. Classic village chatter. Your muscles ache. Your feet squelch. But the landscape, it's incredible. The reeds sway with purpose. The sun glints off slow water. You look up river and think you can just make out the dark silhouette of a distant ziggurat, rising like a staircase to nowhere. I once saw a fish with 3 eyes, says a boy next to you. Entirely unprompted, it tried to bite the sun. Okay then. By late afternoon, the patchwork is complete. The canal's flow is smooth again. Villagers nod appreciatively. The goats remain suspicious. You wash your hands in the river, watching as bits of mud spiral away into the current. Onward to new fields, new villages, new ancient complaints. As evening falls, lanterns flicker to life. The temple drums begin their low, heartbeat thump. A breeze slides over the water, bringing with it the scent of onions, charcoal, and distant incense. You stretch your tired limbs and look downriver. The journey has only just begun. But for now, your hands carry the river's story, in clay, in sweat, in all its gritty glory. You're up before the sun, again. Apparently, Mesopotamia has a strict, you snooze, you lose your barley rations policy. The air is cool and wet, heavy with the smell of churned mud, roasting chickpeas, and river mist. Your muscles still complain from yesterday's canal duty, but the Euphrates waits for no one. Barefoot and bleary-eyed, you follow the same crooked path that Ishbi took you down, this time weaving between sleepy goats and a man furiously swatting mosquitoes with what appears to be a sandal tied to a stick. Respect. Today's guide is a younger canal worker named Tamu, who grins like someone with a well-developed sense of mischief and an overdeveloped fondness for frogs. He tosses a waterskin your way and leads you east toward the irrigation ditches that stitch the village to the river like tiny clay arteries. As the morning haze burns off, you pass an elder hunched over a barley field, muttering to her oxen. The animals respond with what sounds suspiciously like sass. She scowls at them. "You pull like donkeys," she grumbles. "I should have traded you for those sheep from Kish." Tamu points to a raised dirt path that divides the fields like a cracked, sun-baked seam. "That's the levee," he explains. "But if the river misbehaves, it becomes a bathhouse. A very angry bathhouse." You hop up onto the embankment. From this vantage point, you can see how much of life here depends on slicing and diverting the Euphrates just right. Mud brick sluice gates, water lifts with groaning counterweights, and narrow feeder canals carved by generations of hands. It's like plumbing. If plumbing also required regular sacrifice and the occasional exorcism. Historical sidebar time. The Mesopotamians didn't just invent writing, they revolutionized irrigation. Thousands of years before modern dam systems, they had complex hydraulic networks managed by officials called canal inspectors. These folks were so powerful that if you messed with their water schedule, you could end up in court, or worse, yelled at in Sumerian. Some say the first cities weren't born from temples, Tamu muses, but from water. Because when the flood comes, you find out real quick who your neighbors are. That hits deep. You watch as two boys wrestle over a clay scoop, arguing about whose turn it is to fill the secondary trench. I saw a turtle in it yesterday, the smaller one protests. It hissed at me. Tamu laughs. The turtle owns the ditch now. That's the rule. As you continue downstream, the canals widen. You pass a cluster of women gathering cattails and gossiping freely. One of them whispers that the local potter has a second wife in Sippar. She makes terrible beer, they agree in unison, like a choir of very opinionated reeds. You pause by a large rectangular basin where water is pooled for livestock. The edges are reinforced with what look like baked bricks stamped with a seal, some kind of fish and bird combo. That's the symbol of the clan who dug this, Tamu explains. 4 brothers, 2 died digging it. 1 married rich. 1 just got old. You run your fingers over the seal. It's rough and worn, but still proud, still there. By midday, the sun is sharpened into something pointy and personal. You squint across the shimmering fields to where smoke curls from distant cooking fires. You and Tamu stop beneath a lone date palm. He pulls out a parcel wrapped in fig leaves. Inside, dried fish, crushed lentils, and the smallest, saddest pickle you've ever seen. This is lunch, he says proudly. Try not to faint. It's actually not bad. You chew and sip water and listen to the distant creak of a water wheel turning lazily. Somewhere, a child is yelling at a donkey with the ferocity of a tiny general. The donkey does not care. Suddenly, the ground near the canal cracks open, a dry, jagged sigh. Tamu leaps up. Earth spirits, he says, deadpan. Or just bad clay. But I'm blaming spirits. You help him reinforce the edge with bundled reeds and packed mud. It's messy, sweaty work, and it feels like the river is always just one tantrum away from chaos. We build, it breaks. Tamu shrugs. That's the deal. The gods gave us 2 hands and a bad attitude. Here's something quirky for you. Some archaeologists believe that during especially dry years, priests would float little clay boats down the canals, filled with offerings, figs, barley, even small idols, in the hopes that water spirits would accept the bribe. Whether it worked or not is still up for debate. The water never wrote back. As shadows stretch and the air cools, Tamu leads you to a lookout mound where you can see the whole layout of the irrigation system. Look at that, he says. People think temples make a city, but it's the ditches that decide whether we eat. You sit quietly, watching workers file along the levees with baskets of mud and bundles of reeds. You spot Ishbi down below, barking orders at a teenage boy who's just dropped a scoop into the water. Again. Tamu sighs. He did that to me when I was 12. Dropped the scoop on purpose, said the gods told him to. You nod, watching the Euphrates snake through the landscape like a living thing. Unpredictable, beautiful, moody. Some folks say the river remembers everything, Tamu adds, squinting toward the horizon, where it flooded, Who drowned? Who built what? Maybe that's why it punishes us when we get too proud. It's a haunting thought. You tuck it away. The wind shifts. You smell roasting onions and wood smoke. Someone's starting the evening cook fire. You're sore, sun-drenched, and a little itchy, but strangely satisfied. Tomorrow, you'll head toward the city center. You've heard the market's wild, and the temple steps smell like cinnamon and goat sweat. But for now, as twilight bleeds over the reeds, you let your feet dangle in the cool canal water. A frog croaks. A dragonfly buzzes past your ear. The levees hold. For now. The sun rises late today, as if it too is dragging its feet about entering the city. You cross the last stretch of farmland, sandals caked with dried clay, and your hair smelling vaguely of riverweed and roasted lentils. The Euphrates curves lazily at your side, now wider and deeper, as if preparing for something grand. Ahead, the skyline of Ur looms, not like today's sharp glass cities, but like a series of squared-off dreams. Flat roofs and thick-walled buildings huddled together in sandstone tones, with the great ziggurat rising above it all like a giant mud brick wedding cake. Smoke curls from rooftop ovens. You can hear the early clang of copper tools. The city is already buzzing. You step onto a wide, packed earth road flanked by towering walls. Merchants shout from under reed awnings, waving jars of oil and baskets of pungent onions. A potter spins his wheel with his bare foot, shaping a drinking vessel that looks like it's had a very long day. Children dart between legs. A goat wears a garland of flowers, for reasons unclear, but likely religious or personal. You stop to admire a bas relief carved into a public wall. Two bulls locked in combat, with a watching goddess casually sipping from a cup like this is her lunchtime entertainment. A man nearby, likely a priest's apprentice based on his ink-stained hands and overuse of dramatic sighing, nods at the carving. Power, he says. The city's built on it. That's the bull. But also the goddess. She chooses when to sip and when to strike. You nod back, mostly to avoid a lecture. He seems the type. You pass through a narrow gate crowded with guards in leather kilts and dusty sandals. One of them eyes your muddy tunic and raises an eyebrow. You offer a weak smile. He grunts and waves you on. Apparently, covered in silt is an acceptable dress code for visitors. Inside the walls, the scent changes. Less manure, more spice. There's coriander in the air, and cinnamon, and something burnt but delicious. You walk deeper into the market, and suddenly you're in the heart of it all, the bazaar. It pulses like a living thing, noisy and unfiltered. Stalls burst with dates, lentils, copper trinkets, amulets shaped like lion heads, and long scrolls of clay tablets. A man offers you a necklace made from lapis lazuli beads, claiming it once belonged to a priestess of Inanna. Swore off men for 20 years, he whispers. Powerful stuff. You do not buy it. But you do get a fried flatbread topped with crushed chickpeas and pickled onion. You eat it sitting on a sun-warmed step, watching a scribe argue with a baker over what constitutes a legal loaf. And here's your daily dose of history. Mesopotamian markets weren't just about food and trade. They were bureaucratic war zones. Every transaction had a record. Want to buy barley? There's a clay tablet for that. Lease a donkey? Tablet. Borrow a neighbor's cart and accidentally crash it into a temple wall? Big tablet. Possibly two. Oh, and merchants often employed teenage scribes whose job was literally to follow them around and write stuff down on portable clay. The ancient Mesopotamian equivalent of interns. If interns carried styluses and got yelled at in Akkadian. You wander further and stumble upon a tall wooden structure hung with ropes and pulleys. A crowd has gathered. A man stands on a raised platform, his arms painted blue, loudly proclaiming something about the moon god's displeasure. Below him, a woman holds a clay bowl filled with wriggling eels. Tamu, who somehow reappears beside you like a river ghost with excellent timing, leans in. Omen readers, he mutters. They'll ask the eels a question, then slice one open and read its guts. If the entrails spell good fortune, they'll toss it back into the canal. And if they don't, dinner? A child laughs nearby. The eel reader scowls at them, then goes back to chanting. This brings us to your quirky tidbit. Some Mesopotamians genuinely believed in reading liver patterns. They had entire clay diagrams mapping out which lobe meant what. Too much swelling in the right lobe? Time to cancel your trip to Uruk. You edge away before you're asked to donate to the Eel Fund. Past the bazaar, the streets open up again. You follow a processional road lined with smooth stones, each carved with tiny wedge-shaped inscriptions. The road leads straight to the ziggurat, the high, tiered temple that dominates the city. Up close, it's overwhelming. A vast staircase rises in crisp, geometric tiers, flanked by fluted columns and stone braziers that smell of cedar and sacrifice. Worshippers kneel at its base, pressing clay tokens to their foreheads and whispering their troubles skyward. You follow suit, though your trouble mostly involves whether that flatbread was cooked all the way through. Historians still argue whether the ziggurat was purely a temple or also used as an astronomical observatory. Some say its height helped priests track celestial patterns. Others claim it was just a fancy way to store more incense. Either way, it feels sacred and weirdly drafty. You climb halfway up the wide stairs, enough to catch your breath and a view of the whole city. Smoke rises in coils. The river glints in the distance. You can hear the faint sound of lyres being tuned and someone shouting at a stubborn ox. A woman beside you offers you a dried fig. Tastes better at altitude, she says, not quite smiling. You eat it anyway. As dusk falls, the city begins to change. Torches flare. Music hums through the streets. People pour wine into small cups and toast gods, goddesses, and gossip. You wander the side streets now, where families cook together on rooftops and children play a game involving clay rings and lots of cheating. You pause at a doorway, where a woman tells a story to 3 kids and a very attentive cat. She speaks of a river spirit who loved a fisherman and turned into a cloud of butterflies whenever he sang. Did he sing a lot? Asks a girl. Every day, the woman replies, until he caught the wrong fish and everything went strange. Typical. You return to the river's edge at last, passing under a carved arch with inlaid lapis designs. The Euphrates glows, moonlight fluttering on its surface like it's trying to send you a message. You sit by the bank. The city murmurs behind you. The river gurgles in front. You close your eyes. You're full of fig and bread and too much eel lore. Somewhere nearby, someone plays a reed flute badly, but earnestly. Tomorrow, maybe you'll climb all the way to the ziggurat's top. Or maybe you'll drift further south, where the marshes shimmer and the gods wear fish masks. But for now, you let the city sing you to sleep. Morning again. It always finds you too early and far too enthusiastically. Today, your bones feel heavier than the bricks of the ziggurat, but there's no resisting the pull of the river. The Euphrates calls, and you answer, dusty tunic and all. You leave the city behind stepping back onto the levee road as the sky swells pink. Fishermen pass you with nets slung over their shoulders, and traders creak by with donkeys that have clearly made this journey more times than they'd like to admit. The air smells of wet reeds, silt, and the occasional unidentifiable fish thing. Your destination today? The reed marshes, those endless whispering wetlands where the river stretches its arms into 1,000 tiny fingers. Tamu warned you last night over a shared bowl of fermented barley drink. It's beautiful out there, but don't get too poetic. The marshes will eat your shoes, your sanity, and probably your lunch. So, with lunch packed securely, 2 onions, and a suspiciously flat flatbread, you follow a narrow, squelchy path southward. The reeds close in on both sides, green towers brushing your shoulders and tickling your ears. They sway with the wind, murmuring secrets in a language that probably just translates to duck. A heron startles near your path, flapping up like a poorly designed kite. Somewhere deeper in the reeds, frogs are holding a concert with full percussion. You're not invited. Eventually, you find a boat, or rather, a floating basket that insists it's a boat. It's made of bundled reeds, sealed with pitch, and barely bigger than a mattress. Your new marsh guide is Ninazu, a middle-aged boatman with a scar down his jaw and exactly zero tolerance for small talk. You sit. You balance. You don't ask what's under the water, he says. You sit. The boat glides smoothly into the reeds, parting the green sea around you. It's quiet here, eerily so. The city is gone, swallowed by the rustle of papyrus and the steady splash of Ninazu's oar. Dragonflies dart ahead like scouts. Somewhere, something plops into the water with alarming weight. Fish? You ask. Ninazu shrugs. Could be. Could be a marsh god looking for snacks. You don't ask again. Let's pivot to your mainstream fact of the day. The Mesopotamian marshes weren't just scenic, they were essential. They supplied reeds for homes, boats, writing tablets, baskets, even sandals. Entire villages floated on reed rafts or sat on artificial islands stabilized with clay and palm trunks. Think Venice, but with more frogs and fewer gondolas. You pass one such village now. The homes rise on stilts, their roofs a patchwork of palm fronds and woven mats. Children wave at you from a dock made of bound logs. One of them tosses you a flower. You catch it awkwardly and hold it like it might bite. Ninazu nods toward the village. That's where they make the marsh wine. Fermented lily root. Smells like wet pottery. Tastes worse. You float on. The path narrows again, and the reeds lean closer. It feels like the river is folding you into itself. Time slows. Even your heartbeat goes quiet. Suddenly, the boat stops. Ninazu raises a hand. Shh. You freeze. A ripple moves across the water ahead. Long, low, and deliberate. Something just beneath the surface. Ninazu waits. You hold your breath, half expecting a scaled god or a very angry fish. But it's just a giant carp, wide as your thigh and twice as smug. It rolls past lazily, unimpressed by your panic. Ninazu chuckles once, which is apparently the most he laughs all day. Marsh spirits are watching today, he says. They like it when you jump. You resume paddling, heart thumping, and lunch less secure. Time for your quirky tidbit. Some Mesopotamians believed that the marshes were portals, not just to the afterlife, but to before life. Stories tell of fish-headed beings rising from the reeds, offering humans knowledge about farming, weaving, even laws. These mythic teachers were called apkallu, and depending on who you ask, they were either divine messengers or swamp pranks with delusions of grandeur. As the sun climbs, the marsh breathes around you. The air grows thicker, the insects bolder. Ninazu pulls the boat into a shaded cove. "We rest here," he says. "Eat, drink, don't fall in." You sit on a crooked patch of woven reed mat laid over the boat's floor and chew your flatbread, which has taken on a distinctly river-adjacent flavor. A beetle skitters across your sandal. You pretend not to notice. Ninazu hums a song under his breath, something low and circular, like it loops in on itself. You ask what it means. "It's a lullaby for the river," he says, "so it doesn't flip us over." That seems reasonable. You doze briefly, lulled by the heat and the hum and the fact that your legs have fallen asleep. When you blink awake, the boat is already moving again. Now, the landscape changes. The reeds give way to patches of open water, where lily pads float like green coins and the sunlight dapples everything with gold. Birds wheel overhead. A breeze stirs the surface, revealing flashes of fish, plant roots, and discarded pottery shards. "Old cities under here," Ninazu mutters. "Flooded, forgotten, they sink. The reeds grow over them, and the river forgets their names." Historians still argue whether these marsh ruins were seasonal settlements or permanent cities drowned by shifting river paths. Some suggest they were ceremonial spaces, where only priests and boatmen dared go. Others think they were the homes of rebels, outlaws, or people who liked fish way too much. Eventually, you drift toward a wide sandbar, rising from the marsh like a forgotten loaf of bread. Ninazu pulls the boat ashore and hops out with surprising agility for someone whose spine appears to be made of knotted rope. "This is as far as I go," he says. "Beyond here, it's just river and gods." You step out. The sand is warm. A heron watches you from the edge, head tilted as if judging your outfit. You thank Ninazu. He nods once, pushes off, and vanishes back into the reeds like a ghost in a basket. You're alone now. The river spreads out before you, silent and glinting. No city noises, no eel readers, just the soft whisper of water against sand and the flutter of dragonflies. You walk a little, just enough to find a high spot where the view stretches in every direction. Marsh behind you, river ahead, sky above, cloudless and eternal. You lie back in the sand. Let the reeds sway. Let the gods peek. And you swear you can hear the river breathing. You wake to a sky so wide it could swallow you whole. Not a city skyline in sight. Not a temple tower. Not even a reed hut or drifting fisherman. Just marshland, stretching and sagging under the late morning sun, and the lazy bend of the Euphrates curling around it like a cat's tail. You sit up slowly, sand stuck in odd places, and take stock. There's no sign of Ninazu. The river is hushed, like it's holding its breath for something big. A few water birds chatter nearby, but otherwise it's you and the elements, and maybe the occasional invisible marsh god. Your feet find the path again. Not a road exactly, more of a squishier than usual trail carved out by centuries of shepherds, herders, and the occasional poet in search of metaphors. You follow it southward, deeper into the wetlands, where the river slows and the world goes soft. After an hour or so of walking, you reach it, a floating village, like a mirage made of rope, reed, and determination. The homes bob gently on the water, bound together with palm twine and prayer. Wooden walkways zigzag from one hut to another, and children leap between them with far too much confidence. A few goats stand precariously on floating rafts, chewing water plants and silently daring the river to test them. You're greeted by a boy holding a fishing spear that's taller than he is. You lost? He asks, one eyebrow up. Only a little, you say. He nods, then points. Find Essela. She makes good stew and knows things. You head toward the largest of the floating structures, ducking under laundry lines and sidestepping a goose that seems entirely too invested in your arrival. Essela is there, seated on a woven mat, stirring a bubbling pot of stew that smells like garlic, fish, and potentially some kind of enchanted root. Her hair is in a long braid, her sleeves rolled up, and her eyes sharper than obsidian. You're not from here, she says before you open your mouth. City bones. You clomp when you walk. You're not sure how to take that, so you compliment her goose. She grins. As you sit and share a bowl of the stew, which is surprisingly delicious and only mildly suspicious in texture, Essela tells you stories of gods born in the mud, of birds who bring omens, of a man who once fell in love with a marsh spirit and woke up years later with moss growing from his ears. She points toward the open water. You're near Eridu now, the oldest of the old, where it all began. Ah, yes, time for your mainstream fact of the day. Eridu is considered by many scholars to be one of the first true cities in Mesopotamia, perhaps even the first. Founded over 7,000 years ago, it was once a bustling center of temple life and trade, home to Enki, the god of wisdom, water, and mischief. Now, it's mostly ruins, buried in mud and memory, half swallowed by marsh and myth. You ask if there's anything left to see. Essela shrugs. Some old stones, foundations, the temple's bones, but the stories are thicker than the walls ever were. She packs you a pouch of dried fish and bitter dates, then points you onward. Follow the red reeds. They mark the old priest's path, and don't step on anything that hums. Comforting. You thank her and step carefully into your next leg of the journey. The river narrows as you go. The water turns darker, slower. You pass strange rock formations, possibly ruins, possibly just rocks pretending to be important. A half-collapsed dock juts into the shallows, its beams carved with ancient symbols. One of them looks like a fish. One looks like a dagger. One looks like a man falling into a hole. Reassuring. You stop to rest near a cluster of reeds that sway without wind. Their tips shimmer, and you feel a strange tingle in the soles of your feet. You move on faster than strictly necessary. Let's sprinkle in your quirky tidbit. There were ancient Mesopotamian rituals involving reed bundles soaked in river water and placed under sleeping mats to ward off nightmares. These dream bundles were believed to channel the wisdom of river spirits, or at least distract any passing demons with their earthy scent. Basically, the world's oldest lavender pillow spray. You walk for hours, the sun dips, the river grows quiet again, and suddenly, you're there, Eridu, or what's left of it. It rises like a muddy sigh from the marsh, a low mound with stone foundations and half-sunken walls. No towering ziggurat here, no bustling market, just silence and the gentle lap of water around ancient bricks. You climb the slope carefully, brushing away reeds and loose clay. At the top, the remains of a temple spread before you. Thick stone blocks etched with fading inscriptions, a central altar covered in lichen, and oddly, a pile of snail shells stacked in a neat spiral. You sit. This is the oldest of old ground. You feel it under you, pressing upward. Centuries of prayers, sacrifices, hopes, arguments, fish trades, and badly sung hymns. Enki's temple, they say, once stood here, its walls covered in blue glaze, its inner sanctum filled with sacred water and secret knowledge. Historians still argue whether the sacred pool inside was for ritual cleansing or for channeling divine messages. One theory even suggests that the temple operated like an oracle. Visitors would stare into the water, ask a question, and watch for ripples that never came the same way twice. You try it. You lean over a puddle where rain has pooled in a sunken stone, whisper a question into the surface, and wait. Nothing. A fly lands on your nose. You take that as a maybe. As the light fades, fireflies appear around the ruins, tiny stars mimicking constellations you don't recognize. You light a small reed torch and walk the perimeter. Every corner of the site hums with memory. Not ghosts exactly, just presence. Like the land remembers being important. You find a smooth stone and sit, chewing a date and watching the marsh darken. Something croaks nearby, probably a frog. Possibly a priest reincarnated for poor temple attendants. You lie back. The stars reveal themselves one by one. No light pollution here, just the wide, ancient sky. The same one the early astronomers of Eridu would have watched, recording Venus and Mars with nothing but eyes and brilliance. You feel smaller than ever, but not in a bad way. You close your eyes. Tomorrow, maybe you'll head toward Uruk, or maybe you'll just keep drifting, deeper into the river's past. Either way, the current has you now. Dawn pours over the ruins like warm honey, oozing between the old bricks and shimmering off puddles still clinging to last night's stars. You wake with a stiff neck, a mosquito bite the size of a ziggurat on your ankle, and the sudden realization that you've been sleeping on a stone that was probably once an altar. Sorry, Enki, you mumble, brushing clay dust off your shoulder. Didn't mean to drool on your holy spot. The marsh is alive again. Herons glide low across the water. Frogs croak like tiny guttural trumpets, and the reeds sway with a breeze that smells of salt and silt. You eat the last of Asila's dates, drink river water through your teeth. Risk assessment, questionable, and shoulder your satchel. Time to move. Today, you're heading east, along the outer edge of the marsh, where the Euphrates starts to stretch wider and the air tastes faintly of the sea. The locals call this stretch the tongue of the lion, something about the way the river narrows and bites. You decide not to think too hard about that. The trail here is half submerged in parts, and every step squelches like a wet sponge in sandals. Your boots develop their own personalities. The left one sighs. The right one just gives up. By midday, you spot them, reed watchers. 3 figures perched like statues on tall wooden poles rising from the marsh. They sit cross-legged, utterly still, staring into the distance like spiritual lifeguards. You wave. One of them nods once, slowly, like a riddle acknowledging your existence. You pass quietly, not wanting to interrupt whatever sacred daydream they're having. One of them is definitely humming the same lullaby Ninazu sang yesterday. Either it's a local hit, or you've stumbled into a regional cult with great taste in river melodies. Let's slide in your mainstream historical fact. The marshes and southern plains of Mesopotamia weren't just backwaters, they were cradles of engineering brilliance. Early Sumerians created elaborate irrigation networks here, digging canals and using shadufs, think ancient water scoops, to pull water from river to field. Without these innovations, there'd have been no wheat, no barley, and definitely no beer. You owe your soggy snack bread to 1,000 years of mud-based math. You cross a woven reed bridge with all the confidence of someone who's never read about ancient Mesopotamian bridge collapses. A family of otters watches you from the bank, clearly judging your balance. You slip once, nearly baptizing yourself in marsh water, but recover with dignity only a goose could envy. Up ahead, a strange sight. A ring of stones protrudes from the mud, like an earthen crown, each one carved with patterns, some spirals, others resembling fish, birds, or the eye of a bull. It doesn't match anything you've seen so far. You circle it cautiously, and that's when you meet her, Sira, a woman wrapped in layers of linen dyed pale blue, sitting cross-legged in the center of the stone ring. Her skin is sun-browned, her fingers ink-stained, and she wears a necklace made of shells and broken pottery shards. You wonder if she made it or inherited it from a very fashionable ghost. "You're late," she says. You blink. "Sorry, didn't know I had an appointment." She gestures for you to sit. You do, mostly because your knees are starting to stage a rebellion. Sirah is a mud scribe, a rare breed of scholar who records oral histories in the marshlands by pressing symbols into wet clay. Not cuneiform exactly, more of a cousin to it. She calls it song stamping. Quirky tidbit alert. While official records in Mesopotamia were kept in cuneiform on fired tablets, fringe communities, especially in marshy areas, sometimes used temporary writing. Clay tablets that would be left in the sun to dry just enough to be read once, then returned to the river. A kind of ephemeral knowledge system. Here today, gone by tide. Sira shows you a tablet. The symbols are curved, almost musical, and the edges are smoothed into spirals. "This one's a weather chant," she says, "sung by marsh herders to bring fog. Not very useful, but the frogs love it." She lets you try making your own. You press a few crude shapes into a tablet. Your name, a fish, and what you hope looks like a goose, but probably reads as angry banana. She approves anyway. You spend the afternoon there, trading stories. You tell her about Eridu, the eel reader, Ninazu's laugh. She tells you about the stone that hums, a rock hidden deep in the marsh that vibrates when you stand on it. Some say it's just wind and echo. Others believe it's the sealed mouth of an underworld gate. Historians still argue whether this site you're sitting on was once a ceremonial ring for weather rituals or just a clever fishing trap that got mythologized over time. Either way, it feels old and layered, like the ground is wearing 7 different memories at once. As the sun lowers, Sira offers you a reed scroll soaked in oil and wrapped in fish skin. "For luck," she says, "burn it when you need direction, or when you're really, really lost." You tuck it into your satchel. She walks with you to the riverbank and points east. Is that way. You'll feel it before you see it. The wind changes. You part ways quietly. She fades into the reeds, barefoot and humming. You walk on. As dusk stretches its fingers across the sky, the river grows wide again. The trees thin out, and the marsh gives way to firmer land. Drier, flatter, etched with forgotten field lines. The path turns from squelch to crunch, and then you feel it. A wind at your back. Not marsh breath, but city breath. Dry, spiced, ancient. You round a bend and stop. In the far distance, shimmering under the red haze of the setting sun, stands a ziggurat. Massive, stepped, stubbornly regal. It rises from the plains like a god's table, draped in shadow and firelight. The city of home of kings, priests, and stories so old they're practically fossils. You exhale. Tomorrow, you'll reach it. Tonight, you sleep by the water's edge, the ziggurat watching you like an old friend who knows all your secrets but agrees not to mention them yet. The wind wakes you before the sun does. It whistles low across the plain, brushing the river's edge like it's testing its temperature, then slides over your skin with a chill that smells of dust and bronze. The ziggurat is still there, framed in the half-light of dawn. Closer now, its angle sharper, more certain. You stretch your arms, your back popping like an old wooden hinge, and stand. This morning feels different. Less wandering, more pilgrimage. You follow the curve of the Euphrates as it braids itself around low ridges and dry islands. The land is flatter now, firmer underfoot, and the reeds have thinned into patches. Every so often, you pass carved stones stuck upright in the ground, boundary markers maybe, or ancient road signs for travelers who could read chipped Akkadian. There's a stillness to the air, like the world is collectively holding its breath as you approach Ur. Then, in the distance, you spot a small caravan. 3 donkeys, loaded with baskets. 2 men, arguing in a rhythm that suggests they've been on the road together far too long. And a woman seated atop a donkey, head wrapped in linen, holding a lyre. You approach cautiously. The woman notices you first. "Don't worry," she says. "They're only dangerous if you mention crop taxes." One of the men groans. "Don't start." They introduce themselves as merchants. Well, part-time merchants, part-time musicians, part-time philosophers, and full-time complainers. Their names blur together in the heat, but the woman is called Iltani, and she has a face like she's already heard every excuse a person can make. They invite you to walk with them. You accept, grateful for company and shade. As the sun rises higher, you learn that Iltani is a galu, a temple singer, once employed in the very ziggurat you're heading toward. She left years ago, fed up with politics and the humidity of incense halls. Now she travels, collecting songs and selling spice bundles wrapped in palm leaves. And now, your historical fact. The ziggurat of Ur, built during the reign of King Ur-Nammu around 2100 BCE, was one of the most iconic religious structures of ancient Mesopotamia. It was a stepped pyramid dedicated to the moon, god Nana, or Sin, and its base alone stretched longer than a football field. Pilgrims climbed its steep stairs to deliver offerings, consult priests, or just feel closer to the gods, literally and figuratively. Iltani tells you the climb was brutal. No handrails, she says. And if you tripped during an offering procession, congratulations, you just invented skydiving. The closer you get, the more Ur begins to unfold. You pass outer farms, tiny plots of onions, lentils, and barley, and then low, mud brick homes, clustered like turtle shells. Children run between them barefoot, shouting names in languages old enough to be museum exhibits. You catch glimpses of wall art, painted bulls, stars, and a curiously recurring motif of a long-bearded man holding a fish. "That's probably Dumuzi," says Iltani. Or a really unlucky fisherman. Scholars still argue whether he was a god, a king, or just a good excuse for spring festivals. As you enter the city proper, the temperature rises with the stone. Ur is bustling. Even in the heat, the streets pulse with movement. Potters at their wheels, weavers under canopies, scribes hunched over clay tablets in shady corners, and vendors hawking everything from dried figs to tiny terracotta idols. The air smells of sesame, sweat, and anticipation. And rising above it all, the ziggurat. You finally stand at its base, neck craned back, trying to take in all 7 stories of its looming form. The lower steps are wide and solid, carved with remnants of inscriptions and chipped offerings. Vines have crept into cracks. Birds nest on ledges once reserved for sacred offerings. Iltani claps a hand on your shoulder. Come on, I'll take you to the top. But no complaining. If a 60-year-old temple singer can still climb it, so can you. You begin the ascent. Step by step, stone by worn stone, you rise above the city. Your legs start protesting around level 3. Around level 5, they file a formal complaint. Iltani just hums an old hymn and doesn't break a sweat. By the time you reach the summit, your lungs are on strike. But the view? Worth it. The Euphrates stretches like a silver ribbon far to the west, splitting the earth into shards of green and gold. The marshes blur into haze, the desert hums beyond them, and the city of ancient, proud, impossibly alive, sprawls beneath you like a memory made real. You sit beside a half-broken altar, catching your breath. Iltani offers you water from a goatskin flask. This was the highest place in the world once, she says, before towers, before cathedrals. People came from across the deserts just to stand here and whisper into the sky. You try it. You lean forward and whisper nothing in particular, just a breath, a thought, a half-formed wish. The wind snatches it and carries it off like it's been waiting. Quirky tidbit time. There are inscriptions from suggesting that ziggurats weren't just temples. They might have served as early astronomical observatories. Priests could chart the movements of stars and planets from the top, aligning rituals with celestial cycles. Some even think the spiral form of the ziggurat echoed the movement of the heavens themselves, a staircase for the stars. You wonder what they saw from up here, in the clear night skies before electricity, when the moon god Nana would have hung like a lantern over his temple. Iltani stands, brushing dust from her robes. We should get down before the sun cooks us alive. Also, I'm hungry. You descend together, slower this time. At the bottom, she points you toward a shaded courtyard where travelers rest and swap news. You thank her. She waves you off like she's done it 1,000 times before. You spend the evening exploring quieter corners. A potter's shop carved into an old cistern, a moonlight ceremony by the temple's base where women light oil lamps in cracked skull-shaped bowls. Don't ask. And a tiny tavern that serves sour beer with honey bread. You fall asleep under a canopy of date palms, wrapped in the sound of distant drums and the steady lull of river wind. Hums beneath you, ancient and alive. By the time you wake, is already in motion. The temple gongs echo faintly across the courtyard like someone shaking a bag of bronze pebbles. Merchants shout their wares before they've even finished setting up. Somewhere nearby, a donkey is having a very vocal disagreement with its cart. You stretch, wipe the sleep grit from your eyes, and let the scent of baking barley cakes lure you toward the market. Breakfast, hot flatbread wrapped around roasted chickpeas, mint, and something suspiciously crunchy you hope was intentional. A boy with ink-stained fingers sells you a scrap of wet clay with your name written in actual Sumerian cuneiform. He says it'll dry in a few hours or melt in 5 minutes if you drop it in a puddle. Like truth, he says. You like this kid, but the ziggurat is behind you now. Today, you head south. The road narrows again, hugging the riverbank as the great city fades into dust behind you. Your pace slows. Maybe it's the sun, or maybe you're just not ready to leave the cradle of kings so soon. You pass date groves where workers climb trees barefoot, their calloused feet wrapped in rope loops. They shimmy upward like lizards, knives flashing in the morning light. A cluster of women sing rhythmic harvest chants, keeping time as baskets fill and flies swarm. One of them waves you over and throws a date at your head. It bounces off and lands in your hand. "You're lucky," she says. "First of the season." It's warm, sticky, and sweeter than it has any right to be. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Mesopotamia was the first known civilization to cultivate date palms at scale. These trees were more than food. They were woven into trade, religion, and even law codes. Dates paid workers. Date pits were ground into flour. Date wine was, well, probably an acquired taste. As the sun climbs higher, you spot something unusual in the distance. A procession. But not the temple kind. This one's messy, loud, and covered in feathers. At the center of it is a cart shaped like a boat, pulled by oxen. On board, a man painted gold from scalp to sandal, reclining on a throne like he's deeply unimpressed by everything. Around him, dancers with fish masks leap and howl, beating tambourines and throwing fistfuls of herbs into the air. The whole thing smells like someone set fire to a spice rack. You step back, half expecting this to turn into an impromptu sacrifice. Instead, the golden man, who is apparently conscious, if not exactly alert, lazily raises one hand and blesses the ground in front of you with a wet cough. A woman in a jaguar print shawl explains it's the sailing of Enki, a fringe festival celebrating the god of water and mischief. Each year, one lucky priest is smeared in gold oil and carted around like a river deity, while everyone else drinks homemade liquor and pretends the fish masks are scary. Quirky tidbit alert. Not all Mesopotamian festivals were solemn affairs. Some were downright unhinged. There's archaeological and textual evidence of role-swapping days where slaves became kings for 24 hours, and rituals involving elaborate costumes, river parades, and even mock funerals for symbolic gods. Historians suspect these events were both religious and cathartic, a licensed release valve for social tension. You decide not to ask how they remove the gold paint afterward. After the procession lurches onward, you continue south, humming the fish mask rhythm without meaning to. The path grows quieter. Birds chatter from scrubby trees. The river runs slower here, its banks thicker with silt. You spot small shrines tucked into the hillside, piles of pebbles, broken pottery, and faded flowers. Travelers leave them for river spirits, or ancestors, or just for luck. Late in the day, you come to a curious sight, a houseboat. Not like the hollowed reeds of the marshes or the trading barges of the big cities. This is a floating home, tethered to a thick pole with coiled rope. Its frame is built from palm wood, its sides patched with tarred goat hide, and its roof thatched with dried reeds. A woman waves from the deck. She introduces herself as Daganit and invites you aboard like she's expecting you. Which, to be fair, is becoming a bit of a pattern. Daganit is a Lugal mariner, a kind of elite river pilot. She's got arms like braided rope, a voice like thunder muffled by silk, and a laugh that could knock a pot off a shelf. She's hauling spice jars and moonstone amulets downriver, but she's in no hurry. The river, she says, tells her when it's time to move. You sit on her deck while the Euphrates glides past, its surface rippling like fish scales under twilight. She tells stories of haunted eddies, eel-shaped spirits, and the drowned city of Apsu that rises only under certain moons. You pretend not to shiver. Historical debate moment. Some scholars believe houseboats like Daganit's were more common than previously thought, especially in the southern reaches of Mesopotamia. Artifacts suggest extended families may have lived seasonally or even permanently on boats, traveling with the water's moods. Others argue they were too unstable for long-term habitation. But hey, she hasn't sunk yet. As night falls, she lights a lantern shaped like a tortoise and passes you a mug of her river tea, which tastes suspiciously like someone dropped cinnamon bark into boiled pond water. You don't complain. The stars come out, more than you've ever seen. The Milky Way unfurls like a second river across the sky, and Dagonet points out constellations in the old Mesopotamian names: the Plough, the Scorpion, the Twin Gods, and the Raven's Beak. Her finger traces each one with reverence. You know what they say, she murmurs. If the river forgets you, the stars remember. You fall asleep, curled against a coil of rope, the houseboat rocking gently, the sky so wide above you it feels like you're floating in time itself. Is behind you now, but the river still carries you forward. And tomorrow? Well, the sea waits. You wake to salt in the air. Not a sharp sting, not yet, but a whisper of it, brushing your lips as the boat drifts into a wide open bend. The river is broader here, slower, more thoughtful. It moves like it knows the end is near. Dagonet's houseboat creaks as she leans against the tiller, chewing on a date stem and squinting at the horizon. Won't be long now, she says. She means the Gulf, the river's final surrender into the great sea. You'd almost forgotten there was a destination in this long, drifting tale. But it's out there, past the marshes, past the last crumbled ruins, where the silt meets salt and Mesopotamia exhales into oblivion. For now, you sail through the land of waterbirds. It's not a name you read on a tablet or a map. It's just what it feels like. Herons wade with solemn dignity along the shallows. Pelicans patrol the banks like overweight royal guards. Dragonflies dance overhead like they've got somewhere important to be. The marshlands unfold in every direction, emerald and gold, rippling under the wind. Reeds rise tall enough to hide whole villages, and the pathways between them shift like thoughts in a dream. You pass canoes carved from date palm trunks. In one, two boys spear fish with sharp reeds, shouting in a dialect that sounds like the river gargling vowels. In another, a woman rows with her knees while balancing a basket of frogs on her head. No one looks particularly surprised to see a goat-hide houseboat gliding through their front yard. You pass reed houses, too, woven huts built on floating platforms. Some have fences. Some have gardens made from old pots. One has a tethered duck in a collar of woven flowers. You resist the urge to ask if it's ceremonial or just really loved. Time for your mainstream historical fact. The ancient Sumerians referred to this marshy region in the south as Kumar, or the Black Land. It was rich with life, notoriously hard to control, and home to independent marsh-dwelling communities that often resisted royal authority. These groups may have been descendants of earlier Ubaid cultures, living much as they had for millennia, half in the water, half in myth. As you float deeper, Dagonet steers toward a cluster of reed islands where smoke curls from tiny clay chimneys. She ties off the boat, nods toward a nearby dock, and tells you you're having lunch with the matriarch. You don't say no to Yazin, she adds. Not unless you want to get fed to her geese. You have no objections. Yazin is maybe 80, maybe 200. Her skin is weathered like papyrus left in the sun. Her eyes, sharp as obsidian beads. She welcomes you with a clap on the back that nearly knocks you into the water. then immediately sits you on a reed mat and hands you a bowl of fish stew. You do not ask what kind of fish. You do not ask what kind of anything. You eat, you smile, you nod. Yazin seems pleased. Lunch turns into storytelling. You sit in a circle with Yazin and several younger women as they grind grain, pluck reeds, and repair netting. They tell tales of river spirits who steal shadows, of boats that drift into other lifetimes, and of a talking turtle that once tricked a king into trading his entire city for a fig. Quirky tidbit incoming. There are Mesopotamian fables about talking animals, foxes, turtles, even date palms, with personalities not unlike grumpy uncles or cheeky children. One particularly odd clay tablet tells the story of a fish that accuses a bird of stealing a goddess's hairpin. No resolution is offered. Scholars still debate whether it was meant to be satirical, instructional, or just weird bedtime fare for bored priests. After the stew and the stories, Yazin presses something into your hand, a reed amulet, woven in a spiral, with a tiny red stone tied at the center. For the sea, she says. It doesn't always like strangers. That evening, the boat moves again. The water gets saltier. The birds change. Even the insects buzz in a lower register. The land withdraws like it's not sure it wants to go any further. And then you feel it. The river's final hesitation. The moment it knows it's about to end. You pass under a broad wooden gate, half submerged, with clay charms dangling from its beams. Dagonet murmurs a blessing in Old Akkadian. The boat crests a shallow bar of silt, and you see it, the sea, vast, quiet, silver under moonlight. The Euphrates flows into it with no ceremony, no sign, no great boundary marker. It simply goes, the same way you've gone, one moment at a time, one bend, one breath, one barley cake after another. You drift into a narrow harbor where a half-dozen boats bob quietly, traders, travelers, and a few floating shrines. Dagonet ties up and nods toward a small shrine on stilts. They'll let you sleep there. It's safe, mostly. Inside, it smells of salt, wax, and old incense. A lantern flickers beside a clay statue of Ea, god of the deep waters. His beard is coiled like waves, his eyes chipped by time. You kneel before him, not out of devotion maybe, but out of a kind of respect. For the river, for the journey, for all the water that came before. You place Yazin's amulet at his feet. It feels right. As you lie on a reed mat, the waves gently lap beneath the floorboards. You can hear drums from a distant ship, laughter from a nearby dock, and the distant cry of some seabird that doesn't care about history at all. You wonder what lies beyond the gulf. Dilmun, the land of the blessed, a forgotten kingdom where rivers run backward. Or maybe just more salt, more sky, more stars. But for now, you've arrived. Tomorrow, the sea. Tonight, sleep. You wake in the shrine with the taste of salt thick on your lips and the scent of the sea curling in through the slats in the walls. Somewhere nearby, a gull shrieks like it's auditioning for a tragedy. Your joints ache from the reed mat, and your neck protests, but you're alive, which, considering how far you've drifted from home, feels like a minor miracle. Outside, the harbor is already bustling. Sailors unload baskets of dried fish, ceramic jugs sealed with pitch, and coils of copper wire from inland mines. Someone nearby is arguing about sponge taxes. A priest, dressed in bleached linen, raises a conch shell to his lips and blows, long and low. And 3 cats scatter like they've been cursed. Welcome to Eridu, or what's left of it. Yes, it's mostly mud brick ruins and puddles now. But long ago, This was a shining coastal city, the oldest of the old according to Sumerian tradition, the city where kingship descended from heaven, and, according to the myths, the place where humanity got its first divine slap on the wrist for being a little too clever. Mainstream fact time. Eridu is widely considered the earliest city in southern Mesopotamia. Archaeological digs suggest people lived here as early as 5400 BCE, during the Ubaid period. It was home to successive temples, each built atop the last, forming an artificial mound that scholars now think was the beginning of the Mesopotamian ziggurat tradition. You climb the eroded steps of that ancient mound now, where the temple of Enki once stood, patron god of water, mischief, and secret wisdom. The wind whips your tunic and tugs at your hair like it's trying to drag you back into history. The bricks under your feet are cracked and sunbaked, flecked with sea salt and old lichen. But they're still here. They've seen everything. From the top, you look out over the shallows where the Euphrates finally lets go. The river ends without drama. It simply becomes the sea, and the sea doesn't even seem to notice. You remember Dagonet's words, "If the river forgets you, the stars remember." You look up. The constellations are faint now, swallowed by the daylight, but you know they're still there, watching, waiting, whispering stories that sound a lot like your own. It's here you meet Lugal Kadanu. Not a king, not anymore. Just a quiet old man with shell bracelets, sweeping the temple steps with a reed broom and talking to no one in particular. He tells you that every full moon, the gulf glows with blue fire and the ghost of the river flickers across its surface. Sometimes, he says, the river wants to come back. Then he hands you a shard of painted pottery and tells you it's from a pot that once held rainwater, or wine, or maybe tears. He's not sure. Could be all three. He shrugs. You walk with him through what's left of Eridu, weathered cisterns, cracked irrigation channels, and bones of houses built so long ago their ghosts have forgotten their own names. Children play among the ruins, giggling as they balance on broken walls. A goat watches you like it's judging your entire life. Quirky tidbit time. Some Mesopotamian myths say Enki created humans by mixing clay with divine blood, not because he loved them, but because he was bored and needed someone to do chores. One version even claims humans were invented because the lesser gods went on strike. Basically, we were plan B for divine dishwashing. By mid-morning, the tide is in. You follow the shoreline south until the land begins to disappear beneath the reeds and salt water. This is where the marsh turns back into sea, where maps go hazy and myths take over. A small canoe awaits. You recognize the man holding it steady, your old friend from way upstream, the one who first pointed you toward the temple ziggurat with a handful of reeds and a knowing grin. He nods, like this was always the plan. You climb in. He pushes off. The canoe slides silently into the surf, bobbing gently as the current tugs it away from the shore. You look back at Eridu, at the mound of old gods and buried dreams. You wonder how many other feet have walked this same road, chasing the same flickering sense of wonder. And then you're adrift again. The sea stretches ahead, flat as beaten bronze. No sails, no destination, just water and wind and the strange, sweet sense that you've touched something bigger than yourself. Something that doesn't care if you write it down or not. A lone gull cries overhead. The sun dips toward the horizon, painting the waves with gold. You lean back in the canoe, close your eyes, and let the sea hold you like a memory. You've reached the end of the river, the end of the road. But endings in Mesopotamia are never truly final. They circle back, like the moon, like the floods, like the stories we tell under the stars. So drift, let go, and listen. Now let the sea carry you, not to distant lands, but into a deeper stillness. You're no longer walking beside reeds or climbing temple steps. There's no noise, no dust, no merchant shouting, just the hush of water, swaying gently beneath you, like a cradle long forgotten but perfectly built. Breathe slower now. Inhale the salt, the heat, the memory of clay walls and flickering oil lamps. Exhale the tension, the noise, the modern world clinging like sand to your skin. With each breath, the journey softens. The laughter of marsh children fades into the ripple of distant waves. The smell of roasted dates and river fish becomes the barest echo of comfort, warm and far away. Even the stars, those ancient storytellers of Mesopotamia, fade behind your closed eyes. You're floating in silence now, suspended between the river that was and the dream that follows. You've seen ziggurats under moonlight, danced with fish mask priests, slept aboard a houseboat, and touched the oldest bricks of Eridu. And now you rest. Drift a little deeper. Let time dissolve around you like silt in the current. Let your breath stretch, unhurried and calm, until your whole body feels like it belongs here. Weightless, unbothered, remembered. The journey's over, but dreams flow on. End of script. Sweet dreams.